standpoint, it's going to dictate what you need, what equipment you need. And so if you think about it, determining the size of the equipment need is very crucial from a farming standpoint. Equipment that is smaller than needed can result in additional labor time. If we think, oh, I'm going to go out and buy a tractor. Well, what size tractor, what horsepower? We'll kind of get into some of that here in a little bit. But what if you needed if you're doing row crops, or if you're doing cattle and you need a tractor that can at least pick up a 3-prong, a round bale of hay to be able to take it out and move it for you. If you don't get a big enough tractor, or if you don't get a hay buggy, for instance, then it could result in you having to find a way to move, moving the round bale around, across the pasture. Growing up, we get in trouble sometimes. My dad would actually make us just move the round bales, into our show cattle. He'd say, hey, for being bad here, you got to move the round bale. So that was actually one exercise too, but also just moving it around. The labor time for that, and that standpoint, was more punishment time. But then if you get equipment that is on the flip side of that, where you actually equipment that is way too large for what you actually need, it could cost you, financially. But there's also a benefit of it. It could provide you room to grow. But if you're using, a big monster tractor, and you're raising small ruminants, you could be impacting and making ruts that could actually be more beneficial. It could be compacting soils. You could be wasting capital and fuel that could be utilized somewhere else. So if we think about a tractor that costs us $50,000 and we only needed just a small tractor, that's actually extra capital that we could have spent a different way, whether it's management or breeding stock, for instance, or different fertilizer, stuff of that nature. Just ways to think about it when you start. A lot of people jump into the business and they're, well, I'm going to go get the biggest, newest thing, the biggest, shiniest thing that I think I need. In reality, sometimes you really don't need the new JD or the new New Holland tractor whenever you start thinking about things. Even I know some folks are taking this class that might be producing hay or raising hay. Then again, you don't always have to go get the newest equipment. It could be a used piece of equipment that can help you, one, actually produce the product, but two, save you, not have to, put you in so much debt, but also can still, raise the product or raise whatever you're trying to produce. And so we think about tractors, and I kind of want to highlight some of these because usually this is an asset or a cost to many producers that actually, when it comes back around, was actually a bad decision. We can have a 4-wheel drive compact utility tractor here. These kind of tractors, they can do a lot of little things. You got one there in the middle with the front end loader or a little front end bucket. You got one here in the Kubota that could do some things in terms of moving hay around. You could get a kind of like a utility type in that JD tractor that's on the right there. One, it's a mower. You don't need to have the big brush hog behind it to do what you needed to do. Especially, I can see this in a 5 to 10 acre operation. It might be a perfect tractor for you. But then, as I mentioned, you don't always have to go get the new shiniest things. There's a tractor down here on the bottom, a little older. But if you ask someone like my dad, he'd say that's actually the best tractor because it has less computer equipment. It's easier to fix. And if you understand engines, apparently it's a lot easier to handle. And so, you don't always have to go buy the newest ones. We can even talk about just a 2-wheel tractor drive, a 2-wheel drive tractor. Again, here's a different form here on the bottom right of that JD. Here's one here, 2-wheel drive that actually has a box blade there or a tiller of some sort there on the back end that they're using. If you're in a specialty crop, then this could be something that you could be thinking about. Again, have 2 different types here that are similar in horsepower, but one's is older, this old Kubota here versus this New Holland one. So again, if we buy equipment, we start thinking about tractors, think about what you're going to use it for, and think about, okay, does that save me time? Does it save me labor? How much time? How much labor? Start thinking about that in terms of a farm management standpoint or a holistic farm management standpoint. I'll kind of show some examples as to, well, Charlie, what does that mean? And I got some rules of thumbs that we utilize in farm management here in a little bit that I'll show you. We start thinking about trailers. We have a couple of these trailers here that, I went and just found some brand new ones. This one here runs you about $2,000. This one here runs you around $45,000 or $4,500. And the goal of the trailer is to actually be an asset as well. You could utilize this little single axle to move a lot of equipment, branches, hay bales. I've seen some, if you just need 1 or 2 round bales, you can throw it on there. square bells, stuff of that nature. We have one up here, this brand new CM trailer here. You can utilize that for all types of livestock. You can also use it as a covered trailer as well. We would throw firewood when I was younger inside of one of these and move it around that way. And I say that to show, those cost estimates, $2,000 and $4,500. If you need a trailer, you don't necessarily have to go buy a brand new one that you see here. I mean, there are other advantages of it in terms of like depreciation, using that and the accrual way of accounting. But at the end of the day, you can go get a used trailer, but I still don't want you to end up like this person down here. This photo actually went viral a couple of years ago. I believe it was in Virginia, but this person still needed to go get another trailer. Even if it was the brand new one, I'd rather have them have the brand new one than the one that they're using there. But you don't always have to go buy the biggest brand new thing. If you think about trailers and tractors, those are high cost assets that go on your balance sheet, and you'll learn about financial statements later in other modules and how to account for those. But also, if you go buy this type of 2-axle bumper pull trailer and you got 20 cows, that trailer might actually not be suitable enough for what you need it for. You might need to go get a longer trailer or a gooseneck type trailer if your truck allows for it. And that's just another asset in alone. A truck itself, we're notorious in the cattle industry for getting the brand new truck, the new King Ranch dually or the new Dodge Ram 3500 dually, just because, one, it looks good, but also we need to spend money. We thought we needed to spend money for taxes, and that's understandable, and that's a strategy that some producers take. But if we start adding up tractors and trailers and trucks and any kind of other equipment that you might need, that summation of parts becomes really expensive. One, from a balance sheet standpoint and cash flow statement, but also from a liability, of your balance sheet having a high debt ceiling, or not having too much asset in terms of cash on hand. That kind of puts you into a solvency issue. And actually, say for instance, something bad was to happen and the market crashes and you can't get the cash flow you need to offset your debt, you're really stuck in a rut there. Oftentimes, what I would recommend is, buy one piece at a time, pay as you go, go buy one piece of equipment, pay it off, get another piece of equipment, pay it off. Don't spread it out too thin where you have a lot of debt overload happening. And then if something bad was to happen, you'd actually crash out. That's something we want to avoid. And as a beginning farmer or beginning producer, I would really strongly recommend, kind of be hesitant to always just walk in and buy the brand new stuff. And then so we start thinking about what other equipment is out there. I have here, we have a rake here that goes on back on one of these New Holland tractors. You could be needing that. There, I think this is a 10 rake there, or 12, and not necessarily do you need that. You could just have a four ring rake. One of those, you don't always need to go big in order to do what you need to do. There's one right here. This guy right here is doing the same thing at a smaller scale by hand and manually. That would probably be a heck of a workout, but I'd be the first to raise my hand also saying, I really don't want to be doing that. So, you don't always have to have the most expensive, but you also, there's a balance between doing it all physically by labor. But at the same time, if you wanted to do that, it's possible. What I don't want to happen is about in 2018, there was a farm bill passed that allowed for hemp production. For the first time, I believe since almost World War II time. And so that provided a new market or a reoccurring market in the hemp world. And so from that standpoint, companies, equipment companies started making packages for hemp producers because it was something that it was new, it was different equipment. And so they start making these packages. Hey, it's the hemp market. Let's go after, that new market. What you see there is a package of a JD tractor with a new planter. The JD tractor, it was irrelevant at the time. We don't want to worry about that cost, but the cost of this one-seater planter right here was around $12,000. And then they actually had another setup where you could actually have two people, and it was like $20,000. I still think they cost that currently right now. But if you think about it, that's a major input cost that producers started really going after because there was all these promises of the hemp market being so successful. Well, here in Tennessee, that kind of all, the piece of paper I have right here was worth more than what the contract that was written up for those hemp producers. And so from that standpoint, the market bottomed out. And imagine if you were a producer that spent that much capital on this type of equipment, you were left with high debt and really nothing else to do with it, and probably resell it, or hopefully, whatever equipment company you got it from was willing to give you a trade-in or something of that nature. And so one, that costs you time there because you're having to go take the equipment back and you can't use it, but also you lose out on any profitability of the commodity that you were trying to raise, or that you were trying to produce. In this example, it's hemp. So when those are kind of examples we want to talk about whenever it's, especially if it's a new market you've never been in, such as the hemp one was. That'd been a perfect example of not to go out and buy brand new equipment just to try to satisfy the market, because then at the end of the day, the market failed. And so people that were in this business got stuck with, equipment that wasn't being used, debt. And then so they had to figure out a way to, either get out of the debt or figure out a way to use the equipment, one or the other. And so earlier when I was mentioning, we start thinking about inputs and outputs and kind of the way to start thinking about it large versus small. There's a thing called economics called the input output coefficient. And I'm going to be a bad economist and not show any type of chart in this, but I just want to use the thought of the input output coefficient. And so if we think about how much of a resource is required to produce one unit for the enterprise. And so typically for the theory, it's always done for land, labor, and capital, our three biggest inputs. And so if we think about it from a farming example, one beef cow might take 2 acres, especially here in Tennessee. Back home in Texas, especially South Texas, one beef cow might take 10 to 15 acres. But here in Tennessee, 2 acres, and it requires roughly 7 hours of labor and $350 to operate. Now, that's just a guesstimate. We could also increase that with, increasing input prices such as fertilizer and stuff of that nature. But this is just a rough ratio estimate that you can see there. And then if we start thinking about, corn, 150 bushels of corn, that might take 1 acre. And honestly, after this year, that might be an underestimate. Now we're starting to see some 350s. But also 2 hours of labor in aggregate over the year and $395 to operate. Again, that could actually go up with the price of land, input prices going up, stuff of that nature. But this is just the ratio rule of thumbs that we utilize from that input output coefficient. And so if you start thinking about, okay, if we go out and buy all this trucks and trailers and tractors and other assets that we need, what is our return on that? Does it actually help us? And only you as the manager are going to know that answer. And you'll see in other modules, we'll have production budgeting and marketing type of talks. That's something that you will be able to pick up over time. Probably not from the get-go. You might need to use a baseline like I'm presenting here. But over time, you'll understand how much goes into it. And if you're truly into the business to make profit, or at least to break even, you'll have to keep up with your accounting, your balance sheets, your financial statements, and you'll have to keep up with production because over time, if you really hone those skills, that's how, one, you become profitable, but also you're going to become more sustainable in the long run of the business. I know some folks are taking this to hopefully start an operation that can be passed forward in generations to either your children or grandchildren. These are ways to start thinking about it. If we start thinking about beef cows, for instance, if we say, okay, we're going to buy cows and we're going to run them on this amount of land, and here's the stuff that we need. Just within cattle or even sheep and goats, there are efficiencies to be gained just by knowing the genetics of those animals. So if we think about the input of a beef cow, and we say, okay, we're going to chase high quality EPD profiled cattle that are really good on their feet and really good out in pasture. Buying one of those animals versus just buying one from a sale barn makes a big difference. And so it could be, think about input output from that standpoint. Buying good high quality front end cattle can help you produce, high front end quality cattle that you then go sell to make profit. There's also the opposite of that, cost minimization. Being the most efficient with your cost is another way of looking at profitability. To each their own, and however you choose. I would just say pick one or the other. If you're really truly in for profit, or you're doing profit maximization or cost minimization, at the end, you'll end up at the same end point of trying to make money. And so at the end, it's like, Charlie, why does this matter? So what at the end, what I want y'all to take away is, what does this matter? Why does equipment purchases from a farming fundamental side or farming foundation side really matter? Well, equipment is a high cost. We've talked about it, but it's a necessary asset that impacts your bottom line. And I say necessary asset because you are going to need some type of equipment to do what you want. Even if you're doing something simple, buy like specialty crops, and you're going to have to build some type of fence or whatever. You're going to need something. And I put in there explicit and implicit. There's a cost. There's a explicit cost, which is the physical, monetary value of the money on your balance sheet. I mean, on your cash flow statement. Then you end up buying that asset goes onto your balance sheet. But also the implicit. If we buy a tractor that's perfect for our time and perfect for what we need, we save time. And I asked the question to you then: what is your time worth? Because only you're going to know that answer. If a piece of equipment can save you time, remember, if that input output, if a piece of equipment can do something for you that saves you time and also produces something for you, that implicit cost of the time is only you're going to know how you value your time. If depending upon what you're going to be raising, you could have to work on the weekends. And would you rather have a piece of equipment that makes your job easier, or a piece of equipment that is overdone and costing you money, but you can get the job done? If you just buy this monster tractor and you really don't need it, if you really don't need it, but it saves you a lot of time, only you can say, was it worth it or not? And if you feel like it's not, then there's another question there. Buying the wrong equipment can cost you your time and have unwanted debt. Remember, I was mentioning about the hemp industry and how everybody went out and bought these little hemp starter kits and ended up backfiring on them. Think about that whenever you start thinking about equipment. Buying the wrong equipment can then lead you to no profitability, high debt load, which then it can also influence your personal life, because say you're farming on the side and you have a bad debt and you need to go buy a new car for your spouse or your children or something. Well, guess what? That debt's still going to be on you from your farming side. There's that asset there's that effect of the asset on you. And then from just a pure way of thinking, I showed you the guy with the handheld rake moving hay around. There could be a handheld versus non-handheld. Do you always need a big piece of equipment to do what you need? That's up to you. And at the end of the day, the financial side and the financial way of thinking from this farming side, or the farming foundation side of thinking, you will see your assets in the balance sheet and on the cash flow statement. At the end of the day, that is what pops up, because at the end of the day, that also goes to your Schedule F, which you'll learn more about in another module. And that's critical for you, one, to be successful, but also when it comes to being sustainable. And I throw this slide up there just real quick, because if you say, well, Charlie, you mentioned balance sheet, where does this stuff pop up? Heavy, high input cost assets will show up on your balance sheet in terms of not in the form of non-current assets. They're more difficult to sell, and or their sale would be more likely to disrupt the business. It's something that cannot be sold, or that you don't plan on selling within the next year. An example of this is always going to be machinery, equipment, buildings, and land. And if we just stop right there, think about how much money goes into those 4 buckets for you, because that's going to be your highest. If you're going to take on a lot of debt, it's going to be coming from these 4 things that you see here. And trying to manage that and be efficient with your debt and being efficient with your assets, from an input-output way of thinking, again, is going to be real critical for you to be successful. And so just from a broad scheme of things, always remember that whenever you're buying these big pieces of equipment or machinery, they are going to show up at the end of the day on your balance sheet, which then impacts, 1, your net worth, but 2, your profitability of your business. And so just kind of wrapping up, things to think about when we start thinking about equipment. There's always a benefit to talking with other people that have purchased the same equipment or similar equipment. There are going to be these folks that say if it's not John Deere, then it's worthless. If it's not Kubota, it's worthless. If it's not New Holland, it's worthless. You're always going to have that kind of debate when it comes to especially tractors. But talk with others. What did you like? What did you not like? What broke? How often did it break? What was the cost for that stuff? Is it better to lease or buy? Because that's a whole nother concept that I didn't cover today. But you could be taking equipment saying, hey, I want to lease it instead of buy it, and there's benefits to both. The only way you're going to know that is speaking with other people that have done one or the other, and or whatever, a reputable dealer. Just And I say that reputable, and I want to put an asterisk by that and say, some of these equipment stores act like used car salesmen, and they're just trying to get something moved off the lot. And be diligent. Don't always just say yes first, especially when it comes to buying new equipment. Purchase equipment that have parts that are available for you, for the uses, whatever you're using it for. And again, purchase equipment that's essential for the needs of the business. As you get further along in your business and you end up with a lot of capital on hand, and you're like, well, I need to spend it, or I want to spend it for various reasons, then you can, buy extra stuff, buy the new Ford, whatever. Everybody's going to have their own prerogatives within their business, and buy stuff that fits your operation. It makes it the most efficient with assets, and then also helps you at the end of the day. If you remember back to this input output way of thinking, it makes you the most efficient, which then is going to help you at the end of the day when it comes to your bottom line and be profitable, but also efficient and sustainable. Possibly buy to, if me and Matt Horseman were, thinking about buying, we buy land right next to each other, and we're thinking about running cows. And it's like, hey, I want to get a new trailer, but I don't really want to pay for it, all of it, or I don't have enough money. Me and Matt can talk with each other and say, hey, let's split it. Let's, I put the down payment, you do the payments after that. And if it all ends up equal, whatever agreement we come to, we could do it that way. That's a way to cut costs. You could also be looking at buying used equipment. If Matt had this brand new JD tractor from 3 years ago, and he's like, hey, I'm ready to sell it, maybe I can look at buying it from him. That would actually help me. And then also, I put me and Matt as neighbors, because just because Matt buys something doesn't mean that I necessarily need to buy something. Don't always fall in the fallacy of, well, my neighbor got the big red tractor, I'm gonna go get me a new big red tractor just because I got to compete with it. You don't follow that. Don't fall into that fallacy. And so, one other thing when it comes to this equipment conversation, what equipment do I need from a farming standpoint? At the end of the day, it boils down to one thing, and it comes back down to your land. And so what equipment is right for you? An often overlooked key to knowing what equipment you need versus want can be found in soil testing. Knowing the most about your soil is very critical, because then you learn, okay, is this a piece of land that I always got to consistently, put fertilizer on, or is it got good organic material, or what do I need to do there? That's an overlooked key. And in the next video, you're going to learn what is soil testing, because if you need to say you need a piece of equipment such as a fertilizer or some type of broadseed spreader that you didn't know you needed, because actually you need to, help your soil and your grass get back up to par or where it needs to be. That's a key that often people overlook. And so in the next video, you'll learn that. I hope you found this enjoyable and entertaining and full of some questions. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. One time someone told me, well, what if I wanted to write you a handwritten letter to say, thanks or whatever? Well, there's my mailing address for here at UT. Now I always feel obligated to put it on there. And if I was me, I'd be like, why is that guy giving us his mailing address? Well, that's why. Someone made that comment one time. The easiest way to get a hold of me is through my email there that you see, cmart113@utk.edu. And if you're on Twitter, that's my Twitter handle down there. I keep up with stuff from the Southeast, especially for our Tennessee producers. And if there's anything you need from the farming fundamental standpoint, or if there's others, you have questions, we do have decision aids made on our website here at UT in our Ag and Resource Economics department. I'd be happy to get those to you. But with that, I'll pass it over back to Matt. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Dr. Martinez, for a great presentation. So there's a few things that I want to hit on that Dr. Martinez talked about. And it's the challenge that we have of Middle Tennessee as we experience the growth that is just seems to be never ending. The good and bad of it is the economic side starts to clash with just the feasibility side of whatever you plan on doing. Very rarely does it ever pencil out if you're wanting to do a spreadsheet to own the newest equipment, to own all the equipment based on the size of some of our operations. But where we see the challenge to that is, especially when we start to look at whether we're full-time hobby part-time hobby or wherever that may be, is the ability to get the equipment or to get somebody to custom do some of the work that we may need when we need it. With the population increases, we're obviously our farms are getting smaller and smaller. The people that are doing it full time are getting smaller and smaller. So the people that do custom work, whether they're doing custom hay work or they're going to come over there and do some custom work to just even maybe till up a large garden plot for you. Let's say you have an acre garden plot, or custom drill some holes for a bunch of trees. Those number of people are greatly decreasing. And so now what one person was serving maybe 5 people, that one person now is serving 20 people. And so your ability to get that person when you want that person is greatly decreasing. Their ability to get across from one point of whatever county you're in to another point is greatly decreasing. And so, and the number of people that just do repair jobs, the number of people that work on tractors, most of them are trailers or trucks, whatever that may be. Most of them are at their capacity. And so they're really not able to take on too many new people. And so that's where it starts to be a challenge when you start to look at the economic side and then the feasibility side. That's where you'll start to see people that maybe can never justify it on the economic side start to look at buying a piece of equipment because when they need it, they need it. Their schedule may not necessarily coincide with everything that's going on. So they have to take off vacation to work. And so they need that piece of equipment. They don't need to be renting it or anything like that. So that's the challenge that we find in a lot of our areas is sometimes that we are a little heavy on equipment. And that's purely because that may be our only option for our farms. And so when you start penciling it out on a piece of paper, the numbers are not going to look that great. So that's on a case-by-case basis. We'll start getting into some of those business things and tax things more specifically for those that are interested in that aspect of it in some of our future sessions. But obviously it's a challenge no matter what. It's always called economies of scale. It is really hard to pencil out things on small economies of scale. But there's certainly ways to do it. You guys have done a great job of in the chat section trying to highlight different groups that might provide some of these services because they are the challenge. And some of our, I think we shared in our first recap, we shared some of the places that may have some of the services that you may look for in some of the surrounding areas. I would encourage you to look on there and give us feedback. If you know somebody else that's on here that provides maintenance, let us know. And so we'll make sure they get their name on there. Because that's really the best way for us to all connect in agriculture. And then as we start to go, connect with your neighbor. If you guys are going to be, doing some of the similar things, you might be able to work out some agreement to share some equipment. As you said, it doesn't always necessarily pencil out for everybody to have the same equipment. I can tell you, if you looked at the last one, is don't try to compete with your neighbor. If you guys live next to me, you don't have to worry about that. So take advantage of if any and all opportunities you can. But does anybody have any questions that popped up there? One of them is hemp. If you have any questions about hemp, run for the hills. Taylor, anything you have?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. Nothing really to add to that.
Okay. Well, so if nobody has any questions regarding that, I know I see Jesse, you've got a question on any good used equipment sites, places you would recommend. That's true, Monica. That's a good place. We do have some of the Facebook groups that pop up with good used equipment. And I always like to talk to the guys that are doing maintenance. So on our that spreadsheet that has different people that do truck and trailer maintenance, those are good places to be able to talk to. They can also give you input on what trucks and trailers and tractors that they do a lot of work on. I can tell you, and I won't say it on here, I can tell you that you might be surprised on some of the trucks and trailers that are some of the more popular ones that are frequently the first ones to break down. So talk to some of your maintenance guys that are doing repair work. They can tell you which ones maybe to avoid on some of those things. As far as next week's, if anybody's thinking of questions, please let me know. But as far as next week is poultry. Mr. Doug Burney, who works in our office, will be covering a hands-on session with poultry. We'll bring in some birds and we'll start going, we'll scratch the surface for poultry. So we will very lightly cover the processing side. We won't do anything like that, but we'll cover some of the programs that we do, the hands-on clinics that we do that cover the processing side. But a lot of it will be geared towards just raising. And so Doug is by far the foremost expert in state of Tennessee, I will say, with poultry. And so you're going to have a great resource there. So come with lots of questions and lots of open ideas for poultry for Mr. Burney. And then hopefully that'll lead to other ideas and things that you guys have throughout the year regarding poultry. So we're excited to have that. That will be at the Ag Park. We will be doing that inside the Ag Park. Hopefully we can start to see some warmer weather down the line, but right now we'll keep that one inside. So any last opportunity for questions? So good, this is that kind of last recorded session. And so we will be going from there. If nobody has anything. All righty. I will stop recording.